Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Lock Shockers, what's up? It's Nielsen and Huss with you. Did I say Lock Shockers? I did, didn't I? I went to say Lock Shoppers. Also, I think you're muted, Huss. Lock Shop is brought to you by Coolbet. There he is.
I was in so much shock that you dropped the Lock Shockers right off the bat as opposed to Lock Shoppers. But hey, we can run with that for today. We can run with that.
Make it work. We can certainly make it work. We've got a few things to get to today. Give us some puck picks a little bit later on. Just a light night in the National Hockey League schedule. Just 3 games to play tonight. So we'll get into that a little bit. Last night was interesting night. Ottawa puts up 7. The Oilers lose to the Sabers. Calgary's down 2-0, come back and win. And Vancouver, I guess if you're not live betting the opposition when Vancouver goes up right now, we're dropping the ball here, aren't we?
I thought last night was going to be the Canucks' time to get a win and get on the right track. It was the exact same thing. Up 2-0 after the first period. And then another L. That's a brutal start for the Canucks. And I mean, it's one thing to lose games. It's another thing to be up multiple goals in all of the games and lose them all right now. I don't know. You must have some good Filthy Bruce content coming up on the Nielsen show these days, Dusty.
No shortage of Filthy Bruce. That's for sure. All right. You can give us a follow on Twitter. He's at Hustlerama. I'm at Nielsen TSN 1260. We're at Lock Shop Bets on Twitter as well. Give us a follow over there. Huge week 20 in the Canadian Football League coming up here, Huss.
Yeah. Hey, just quickly before we go, I got to give a shout out to the Sens. That was the cool bet, the Lock Shop daily pick yesterday. And needed to get this going positively into NFL week. And we went to the puck, and that was a bizarre game. The Sens were up 3-0. Then it was 3-3. Then they were up 6-3, and then boom, it was 6-5 again. I mean, the Boston Bruins can score in bunches, but it was a nice spot. They were playing on the second of back-to-backs. And I was just on the phone with a guy that we're working with in Ottawa, and he had said that he cannot remember the buzz in that building for years.
Yeah, sold out, right?
I get sold out, standing room only. I mean, I said, hey, the offseason champs, although I know Calgary maybe has a bit of a claim to that after everything that Pierre Dorian did earlier on. They didn't have a great start. They got that win. Hopefully Ottawa is a relevant team. And then the other team in the East that hasn't been relevant for a few years showed something in your neck of the woods. How about the Buffalo Sabres? And my God, that goal by Tage Thompson. That was beautiful. A showstopper last night.
Beautiful goal from Tage Thompson. Horrible turnover just inside the blue line, but Thompson still had to finish. And the sweet mitts on the big man, I can respect that. You don't see many guys his size who are elite offensive players, but this dude almost scored 40 last year.
He went from 8 goals to 38 goals. and we got to give a shout out to our old pal Chris Abbott, who got us onto the Tage Thompson goal props in the second half of last season. I mean, I, like many people, wasn't paying a lot of attention to the Buffalo Sabres last season until Chris started hammering successfully Tage Thompson goals every game in the second half of the season. So he's a guy, he's found his way onto a couple of fantasy lineups for yours truly this year. But, listen, I look at those teams, Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit. We're all expecting more from those teams. And listen, hopefully one of them might get into the playoffs and shake things up a little bit. But overall, great night for the Sens last night. And I got to say, a pretty exciting start for this Buffalo Sabres team that is now starting to reap the benefits of being so bad for a few years now that they got Power and Darlene on the blue line. And, that Jack Eichel trade, Alex Tuck has been unbelievable on the ice and more so maybe even off the ice. Peyton Krebs there. And anyways, quite interesting to see how things are shaping up over in the East with some of the teams that have been patsies for the last few years. Now, stepping up and winning some games.
Yeah, very nice to see. And we'll get to some hockey picks.
Show in Edmonton like?
Pretty fired up. The inbox today is pretty fired up. I mean, it is just 3 games of an 82-game schedule, but 3 like their start wasn't bad last night, but they were tied at 1. And then in the second period, they fell behind 3-1. And then in the third period, they dominated, but Comrie stood on his head. So they get Carolina on Thursday. And if they come out and play the way that they have in good chunks of these games, Carolina going to spank them. So we'll see what the bounce back is like. You know us, we're on hockey right now. We might as well dish out our puck picks and then dive into the Canadian Football League, right? It's only a 3-game schedule tonight. We might as well get into it. I've got a player prop that I'm going to go with because it's a little bit of a lighter schedule. You took the one pick that I really like. I'm backing where you're going. So let's lay that out first.
Yeah, well, I'm going to throw that one down, I think, for our lock shot pick of the day. Although we do have Raptors starting off tonight. And, of course, the ALCS with the Yankees win yesterday. They're in Houston tonight. Then game 2 between the Phillies and the Padres. But, yeah, I'm going to stay in the ice, and I'll drop this out on the CoolBet socials a little later on today. We've talked a lot here in Winnipeg about how weird the schedule was. I mean, the Jets had their home opener on Friday night against the New York Rangers, their opening game of the season. And the Rangers were playing the second end of back-to-backs in their 3rd game in 4 nights. What was even crazier was that night the St. Louis Blues still hadn't played a hockey game. They played on Saturday. They are 1-0 on the season. And now they get number 2 tonight, taking on the Seattle Kraken, who've lost their first 2 on home ice. St. Louis is minus 135 right now. I'm going to lay the road team. I think St. Louis, and listen, we're here in Winnipeg in the Central Division. We see a lot of those teams. I know there's some questions about St. Louis as to, Jordan Binnington, how much they can count on him for the full season. A couple of issues in the roster, but I just think that St. Louis is on a bit of a different level than the Seattle Kraken right now. And considering all the rest that they've had and how antsy I'm sure they are get to play, I'm sure they'll have a lot of jump in this game out on the West Coast tonight. So we're going to take the road favorite St. Louis Blues as a minus 135 fave tonight in our lock shop puck pick for the day.
Just the 3 games. I didn't want to touch Winnipeg, Colorado. I want to watch that game. Didn't necessarily want to touch it. Gabriel Landeskog, by the way, out for 12 weeks. So that's a loss for the Colorado Avalanche. Hopefully he'll be back and healthy for the second half of the season. Philly, Florida. I took some time looking at the sides in this one. A part of me contemplated the Flyers plus 1.5. It's plus 110 or something right now, was it plus 110 or is it even a better number? Just a sec. I've got it right here. Yeah, it's plus 110. Part of me contemplated the Flyers. They're 3-0, right? They've been playing pretty well. But then I looked in 2 of the games, they were heavily outshot. I would expect Florida to really carry the pace of the play, but I'm not comfortable enough to go Florida on the puck line. So I'm going to dive into a player prop here. I'm going to go Carter Verhaeghe to score a point at minus 135 tonight. He's been held pointless in his first 3 games so far this season. He's riding shotgun with Barkov. He's playing like 17 minutes a night. There's no shortage of opportunity. Had an excellent season last year. I think Verhaeghe's due to get his first point of the season tonight against Philly. So my puck pick tonight will be a player prop. Carter Verhaeghe of the Florida Panthers, minus 135 to get his first point of the season.
Yeah, Flyers are 3-0.
I know. That's why I was like, man, plus 1.5, plus 110 maybe. But they've been heavily outshot in 2 of those 3 wins. Carter Hart's been really good so far. So that's big news for them.
That's great news for the Flyers. And, Blues, by the way, that number, I was looking at it last night when I put it at minus 135. Interesting. It's minus 127 right now. So you got an even better number right now than it was last night. And just a quick note on that Jets Avalanche game for folks that are maybe considering a DK lineup or throwing a little sprinkle down on the game. I'm just seeing from Scott Billick, who is in Denver right now and is going to join us along with Mike McIntyre from Denver on Winnipeg Sports Talk this afternoon, reporting that Nikolai Ehlers not out for the morning skate right now. And Ehlers was nursing something. He tried to skate after no practice yesterday and found he couldn't go. Suspect he will miss tonight. Won't know until Scott Arniel speaks. Sounds like he blocked a shot with his hand in Dallas, but stayed in the game. So the way it looks right now, or at least in the morning skate, was the new guy, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, is going to get his first start on the 4th line. And Sam Gagner, who was on the 4th line, is going to move right up with Connor and Scheifele. That was the one thing that the Jets thought they had in Sam Gagner, was a real versatile player that could play in a bunch of spots, would take a regular shift in the bottom 6, but when called upon, could probably hang with some top players, at least for limited time. So be interesting to see. And if that is the way things go, Sam Gagner might be a great value play on a DFS lineup tonight, playing with Scheifele and Connor.
Excellent. Yeah, I just love seeing Sam Gagner have success. He's just the best dude. I love that he's found a spot there in Winnipeg, and hopefully he'll be able to roll a little bit. Not say he's getting a 3-year deal like Zach Collaros, but still good to see him get that.
Well, and he had the game-winning goal in his first game as a Jet.
Yeah,
and
that's big too.
I don't know when the last time the Jets had a game winner from the fourth line, but it was probably a long time ago. So we'll see what happens 1-1 going into tonight, but taking on the champs. But yeah, you mentioned as we get into CFL, the big news yesterday in Winnipeg, 3 years for Zach Collaros. I mean, the fairy tale nature of Collaros' time in Winnipeg is so amazing. I don't know if you saw the tweet that the Bombers put out announcing it. They did our buddy Rod Peterson dirty a little bit using his quote from the trade. This was a nothing trade to me.
Pretty bad.
Well, it was hilarious. But to be honest and full disclosure, I said on WST yesterday, sure as hell glad they didn't grab the audio from my show that day, because I was on the air as it happened, and it came out about an hour afterwards. And I remember saying to Remo or Rick or whoever I was on with at the time, almost jokingly going, well, sure would be nice if they ended up giving up that conditional first-round pick for signing Zach Collaros. I mean, it seemed like it was just like insurance at the end of the season. And lo and behold, the guy runs the table, wins the Grey Cup, re-signs here, wins another Grey Cup, looking to win another one, and now is a 3-year deal. It's been a pretty crazy run for Zach here in Winnipeg. And as we get into the CFL picks with no Bombers still making news today. And I see Justin Dunk reporting that they're working on an extension with Willie Jefferson, trying to keep the core of the band together. The one thing people are wondering is, when's that extension for Mike O'Shea going to be announced?
I know.
But,
I said that yesterday. I said, you get Zach done, got to think there's a deal coming for O'Shea somewhere as well. I mean, it has to be hand in hand. You can't let O'Shea walk away, nor would he really want to leave, right? Yeah.
I don't know what anyone else in the CFL could do to get him out of Winnipeg right now with what he's built and being a part of something so special. If anything, they're going to start working on the statue of O'Shea outside of the stadium, along with Cal Murphy and Bud Grant at some point over the next little while. But still lots of work to do for the Bombers. Once we get to the playoffs, still lots of work to do for the rest of the league as we get into this league. Dusty, just give us a rundown of the playoff scenarios right now. Because with a couple weeks left in the regular season, many of those playoff scenarios, I think, play very much into the line of thinking for the picks that we're going to get to in a minute.
This is great. I mean, the next 2 weeks to wrap up the Canadian Football League regular season, depending on what happens this week, next week might be a little less exciting, or it could be, a bunch of winner take all, home field here, home field there. How it works, Ottawa gets Hamilton for back-to-back games at the end of the season. If Ottawa was to sweep those 2 games, they would move into third in the East and have the 6 wins that the Riders would have if the Riders get swept by Calgary. So there's still actually a chance, and they'd have to sweep, and they need the Riders to get swept, which could happen because Calgary needs those 2 wins. There's still a chance that Ottawa could still get into the playoffs. So their game against Hamilton is a big one. This week, Montreal is 4 points back at Toronto, but they're wrapping up with a head-to-head. So if Montreal was to win these final 2 games against the Argos, they would take top spot in the East. And then you've got BC and Calgary. BC holds the tiebreaker against the Calgary Stampeders. So BC would have to lose tonight in Edmonton. Calgary would have to sweep their home and home or with the Riders. That would put them up to 24 points. BC needs one more win. BC needs to win tonight, or they need to beat the Bombers next week, and they will have the West semifinal in Vancouver. So there's a bunch of things still to be decided. All we know right now is that the Bombers will have home field in the West. That's all we know with just 2 weeks left, which I think is pretty exciting.
You know what we should ask Pat for over at CoolBet HQ? Is a number. When's the first game here? First game isn't until Friday night.
Friday.
We should talk to them about posting up, even if it's just for 36 hours or whatever, odds to make the playoffs for those 3 teams that are in the mix.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I'd be very interested. I mean, I think you'd have to give the nod to Hamilton.
Hamilton for sure, heavy favorite.
I mean, I think Hamilton would be the favorite. I think Saskatchewan's in a real tough situation. And obviously Ottawa, knowing that they'd have to win both. But it would be interesting, essentially a 3-horse race for that final spot. I'd like to know. We'll see if we can do that for folks. And if we do get it, we'll mention it tomorrow on the show and let you know what those numbers are for both the Riders, Ottawa Red Blacks, and Hamilton to lock down that final playoff spot in the East.
Only one game that we're going head-to-head on this week. We're on the same side in 3 of them. Let's start with Ottawa as a 6-point dog against the Ticats, Huss.
Well, you sort of laid out what's at stake for these teams, and despite losing last week to Montreal, can you imagine if they had won that game?
Yes.
Potentially, if Hamilton had lost. I mean, that was a wild week in the Canadian Football League, and of course, you were right there for 2 absolute thrillers on the mic, as has seemed to be more almost regular business for you on the TSN broadcast this year. Listen, I can tell you one thing: the Redbacks love playing for Bobby Dice right now, and they are not quitting on this season whatsoever. And the fact that they've been through what they've been through and they're still realistically alive for the playoffs, especially if they can get this win this weekend, I think is going to make Ottawa a really feisty underdog in this game. We saw them win a couple weeks ago in Bobby Dice's first game as the head coach, and we saw them push Montreal in a very close game. They ended up losing by 4 last week. Hamilton is such a Jekyll and Hyde team, Dusty, and we've seen the best of Hamilton against Calgary last week in clutch time. We've certainly seen them with that big win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers earlier this season. And then we've seen some dreadful games from Hamilton. So I'm not sure I'm at the point where you can really count on anything from the Ticats. But I will say this: both of these teams have a lot to play for right now. I think I'd probably give Hamilton a slight advantage when it comes to personnel. But at the same time, I think that Ottawa is already playing for the guy that's coaching for them right now. And I think we're going to have another exciting, close game. So give me the Ottawa Redblacks +6 in this one against Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that really stands out for me here. I mean, since they let LaPolice go, Will Arndt's been calling the offense, and he's putting Arbuckle in really good spots. Nick Arbuckle, over their last 2 games, has completed 82% of his passes with no interceptions. He is 56, and it's not like he's only throwing the ball 20 times. He's 56 of 68 with 2 touchdown passes and no picks in their last 2 games. When you can look after the football and be that accurate with it, whether they're deep shots or not, and he's been putting up relatively, I mean, what are the yards? He's put up 229, 271, threw for 363 in that game against BC. He's kind of settled in there a little bit, and I think you combine that, and Hamilton didn't have this issue last week, but this is a team who came into that last week's game against Calgary with the worst turnover ratio in the Canadian Football League, and they won the turnover battle against Calgary and ended up winning that football game. But this is a team who has a history this entire season, pretty much from start to finish, of not being able to look after the football a little bit. So I think you combine that with Arbuckle's newfound accuracy, and I'm not sure Ottawa wins this game, Huss, but I do think we're going to be in for a close one between these 2 teams.
Yeah, listen, they're not going to quit. I mean, they'll hang out in that game. And even if they're down in the second half, I think that they will continue to push forward and maybe get a backdoor cover. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable at the +6 for this game in Hamilton, which brings us to the second Friday night game. I imagine you're going to be calling this one back at home.
I will be doing this one, and then I'll be in Regina on Saturday for the Stamps and Riders, which I'm looking forward to as well. But yeah, 7-point home dogs looking to get that first victory in over 1,100 days. That's a tough task right there.
There's a few things on this. BC needs a win to clinch that home game and not have to worry about the final week of the season in Winnipeg. I think that is huge. I think they will get it. I can't believe we're talking about this winless streak at home still right now as we approach the playoffs and the end of the season in November, but here we are. And to top it all off, Taylor Cornelius. I mean, is he still in the hospital right now with this spleen thing? I mean,
I haven't seen I think he's out, but he's certainly not playing. Trey Ford will be starting for the Elks this week, which is not an ideal spot for the guy who hasn't played since June and came in and threw 1 ball and had it intercepted last game. This is just a tough spot to put this kid in. Simple enough.
Absolutely. And hey, he's got to look at it as another opportunity to get some experience. But that being said, I mean, it doesn't give me a lot of hope that the Elks are going to finally get this win. Hey, stranger things have happened. I mean, it wouldn't shock me, but I just think BC has so much to play for. Knowing that they're going to be playing in that first week of the playoffs, the ability to win this week and maybe rest some of their starters or potentially give Nathan Rourke some reps if he's actually able to get back in the mix in that final week of the season will be huge for them. And then it comes down to the quarterback position. I've really been Cornelius has been growing on me throughout the year. I'm not sure that's been the same for Elks fans, considering they haven't won at home yet. But just the drop off to Trey Ford that, as you mentioned, has only thrown one pass over the course of the last couple months, and it ended up in the hands of the wrong team. Not a good equation for a team trying to end an extended losing streak. And the number is big for a divisional game for a team on the road, but I just think that BC right now is in a bit of another class. And to be honest, I think BC is going to want to play a hell of a lot better than they did against the Bombers last week. I'll be honest, they didn't deserve to win that game. I mean, Drew Brown threw those 2 picks that got returned. And it was basically that and the return game, which was absolutely bananas on both sides. I believe it was a CFL record.
Yeah, it was.
So I think BC's got to get right, especially if they want to or plan to maybe rest some of their key guys in advance of a game at home against Calgary. So give me BC -7 over Edmonton. And you guys on 1260 can talk about the drought and how many days it's been since they've won going all the way into next season.
You know what? I know you said it's a big number, division game on the road. I am surprised it's not even a little bit more, though. I mean, you're starting a guy who hasn't played football since June, who only has 2 career starts in his, maybe only 1 career start in his Canadian Football League career so far, for a team that hasn't won at home in 2 years, that has nothing left to play for. And it's the worst team in the Canadian Football League. Like, part of me goes, why isn't this number just a little bit more? So I take it at 7. I'll take the BC Lions at 7. I mean, I will give the Elks credit. They didn't give up last week. Like, they had nothing to play for last week either. I thought they balled out pretty good to the point where their quarterback had his spleen injured on a play. I just don't know if they have it this week against BC. So I'm going to roll with BC Lions -7 as well. That will bring us to Toronto and Montreal. The only game we're going head-to-head on, the other 1.5 is a very interesting number. We'll get to that. I think this 1.5, Toronto-Montreal, is exactly where it should be. To me, this is a coin flip, Huss. Why are you going with the Argos?
You know what? I just think they're a bit better than Montreal. And as you kind of laid out right now, they got a 4-point lead on the Alouettes, but it's a home and home. Much like the situation for BC, there is something to be gained immediately with the win. That is booking the Eastern Final at BMO Field and giving them the opportunity, if they would like, to rest. The weird thing about it is if you assume that Montreal is going to win that semi, and that's far from a solid assumption, it'll be 3 straight games between Toronto and Montreal.
Yeah, good point.
The final 2 games and then the East Final. So I think it's certainly in Ryan Dinwiddie's best interest for his club to go out, get this win right now, and then be able to put the playbook away, maybe give a little bit of rest time to a couple players that might need it to get ready, while the Alouettes have to take on one of Hamilton, Saskatchewan, or Ottawa in the East Final. And I'll tell you what, the Argos they've been impressive throughout the year. They've sort of earned that 10-6 record. There's a couple games, frankly, that got away from them. It's kind of funny. They're 4 wins, but they're only plus 22 in the point differential. But again, that's significantly better than Montreal, who is the definition of a 500 team, 8-8, plus 6 in the points category. So, and listen, Montreal got that win last week against Ottawa. It was another tight game. To me, I think the Toronto Argonauts place their stake in the ground as the best team in the East this weekend, give themselves some options for the final week of the year, and most importantly, put themselves in the best situation to win the game that really matters. That's for a trip to Regina on November 13th.
This is a tough game for me. The weird thing is that they're both red hot. They're the two hottest teams, technically, in the Canadian Football League. Montreal's won 6 of 8. The only team they've lost to since August 4th is the Ottawa Redblacks, and they lost to them twice. Outside of that, they beat everybody else since early August. Makes no sense. And Toronto has won 6 of their last 7, but I still don't think they look very good, to be honest with you. So I'm going to go with the home side, getting a 1.5 here as a dog. And I think there's a better vibe around the Montreal Alouettes. You know, Machocha and this team, they look like they're vibing in the right direction. Well, the Argos still seem like a little bit of a stress case to me. Like they know that they should have this division wrapped up and they're going to be very disappointed. Like to me, there's the way I would think these two teams approach this is that Toronto's got a ton of pressure on them right now, and I don't think the Alouettes feel that way at all. I think that helps them play a little bit looser at home. I love the Alouettes defense. They've let me down a couple of times this year when I've said that, but I'm going to go with Montreal plus 1.5 here to make next week really interesting. That's going to be great.
Well, I know, always going for the story, especially for the broadcast. That certainly would make the final week a lot more interesting for those of you calling the games. It's funny you say that about the vibes because I just remember the vibes around the Alouettes when Kahari Jones got fired and they brought Danny Machocha in. And I don't know, Machocha's an interesting. People have a very interesting opinions on Machocha. I've always thought that, listen, I think the guy's a good football mind. I've thought he's been a bit of a fraud in the past as far as like a real leader and this rah-rah guy. But I'll tell you what, you sort of laid it out. They have been winning. They've got themselves into a position where they are certainly a contender to make it to the Grey Cup. And, they could make a big statement with a win this weekend that would then allow them to earn a bye with a win next week. So this certainly, I think, is the most interesting game of the week and probably the most impactful for both teams.
And then there's the Riders and the Stamps. Riders got to have it, but we've said this about the Riders for 2 months. And here they are in Calgary, who, depends on how BC settles in with Rourke. But, Calgary, with the way they've been playing on both sides of the ball, they're getting some of their offensive pieces back. I don't know. This is we talk about in the NFL every week, fishy lines. This is a fishy line to me, Huss. The Riders' offensive line has been a train wreck the entire season, and Calgary's front four are a nightmare. I know Cody Fajardo didn't practice Wednesday. Dickinson said he's going to be starting in the game, so Riderville can, I guess you can rack to that however you want. But this is almost going to be an interesting way to end the year because I think he's going to be on the run for his life like he has been most of the year against this Calgary defense. I don't know why this is only 1.5. I guess this would be my question, Huss. Is this why? BC takes care of business Friday night. Calgary has nothing to play for? Would you set a line like this? Because outside of that, I don't know why this is only 1.5.
That's a great point. I had not thought of that. I am with you. The number did not make a lot of sense, and it is the fishy line of the week in the Canadian Football League. That being said, I think it's over for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I think that if they were a horse, this is the opportunity for the Calgary Stampeders to take the Riders out to the glue factory, basically. And I don't think there'd be a more appropriate way for the Riders to end a season where they are hosting the Grey Cup with another depressing home loss in front of the great fans of Saskatchewan. This has been a disaster. The second half of the year has been, a complete disaster. And I'll tell you what, the ramifications of this season, I think we're going to see in the offseason. I think there's going to be some big changes in Saskatchewan. And even more likely, if it ends with a resounding thud at Mosaic in their final home game of the year. Calgary is a way better team than the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And listen, I think there's the possibility of Calgary resting guys next week. So I certainly think they'll want to have their best in this game, finish off the important part of their schedule on a strong note, have the opportunity to rest some guys next week in a nothing game, and then be ready for the BC Lions on the 6th of November for a trip to Winnipeg at IG Field in the West Final.
The Riders are 2-8 in their last 10. One of their wins came against the Elks. They also lost to the Elks at home. And then their other win was against the BC Lions with Pipkin and O'Connor at quarterback. That's it. Those are their only 2 wins in the last 10 weeks. And we're sitting here saying they're a 1.5 point dog against the Calgary Stampeders, who've only lost to Winnipeg, BC, and 1 game to Hamilton, and that's a game that they gave away. So, I don't know. It just, it seems too good to be true.
I have to say, even if BC wins that game and they know that they're on the road in the West Final, I think that means go out, have a great game, win this one, put the Riders out of their misery, and then you can rest some guys and prepare for the big game that'll be 2 weeks following that.
All right, so there you go. We're riding together on the Red Blacks +6, BC -7, Calgary -1.5, and then we're going to go head-to-head on that Toronto-Montreal game where the number is 1.5 right now. A couple of puck picks if you're just joining us now. Later on, Huss is on Seattle -135 tonight, or not Seattle, St. Louis. -135 in Seattle. And I'm on Carter Verhaeghe, also at the number of -135 to get a point, his first of the season for the Florida Panthers tonight against the 3-0 Philadelphia Flyers. Thursday night football, study up. Saints and Cardinals tomorrow, Huss.
It's not too often you have a matchup of 2-2-4 teams, and that's the best primetime game of the week. But where we are with the National Football League, although some really interesting angles on both of those sides for that game tomorrow night. So we'll chop it up there and then get ready for a big Friday. Looking for a bit of a bounce back from a tough week 6 in the National Football League. I'm already looking at the lines, and by the way, major buys this week with some of the best teams in the league being out. Philly's out, Minnesota's out. So we're gonna see plenty of mediocre teams get the spotlight. It starts tomorrow with the Saints and Cards, and we'll hit that in the lock shop tomorrow afternoon.